What's going on, Bulls Nation? Welcome into the CHGO Bulls podcast, coming to you live on Friday afternoon, June 21st. Summer is here, and maybe so is a Bulls rebuild. I am Peg Bulls _Peg, joined by my guys, Big Day, Bow, BAWL Sports, Will the Goat Gottlieb, Will _Gottlieb. We got our producers, Joey and Steven, hanging out with us in the background. Well, we have all had about 24 hours now to process the jarring trade. The Bulls sending Alex Caruso, their defensive ace, to the Oklahoma City Thunder, getting Josh Giddey in return, the young prospect who has flashed some potential but seemed to have lost a sizable portion of his role on a rapidly growing and changing Thunder team that is at the top of the West and looking pretty darn good right now. Lots of reactions from all over the NBA world when this trade went down yesterday afternoon. We were lucky enough to be joined by our guy, Kendall Gill, who was in studio with us yesterday, right as the news broke. Go check out yesterday's episode for our immediate reaction after today's show if you didn't get to that one yet. Gentlemen, let me just check in with you guys first. Like, how's everybody doing? My brain is still kind of fried and scrambled right now. Goat, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. I think, look, I don't love this trade. I think I like it a little bit more than some of what the reaction I've seen on Twitter. And I can kind of lay out all the reasons if you want to really get into it. But look, I think at the end of the day, the Bulls really need to start making changes in getting themselves more towards a younger core of players with upside. And I think it's possible that they could have done better on the trade market had they made a trade, prior to the deadline when they had better offers. I also think it's possible that those same kind of offers weren't as available for the Bulls now that Caruso has only one playoff run on his contract as compared to two. So it's reasonable to assume that maybe the same kind of offers weren't out there. And also I think AK clearly targeted Giddey specifically. You can say what you want about him as a player. We can agree or disagree on how good he is, where his potential is. But I think AK clearly was after that kind of a skill set, that kind of player, and he went after his guy. Now, again, we can agree or disagree about him as a player, whether that was the smart move, the business behind it, the process behind it. I don't necessarily agree with all that, but he clearly was going after a certain guy that he valued more than picks. And so I think that helps just kind of frame the grade more so than make excuses for it or try to justify it in a certain way. Because at the end of the day, I don't love the trade, but I do think it was a good move to get themselves, to open up some other moves for themselves to do. And we'll see what those look like as the next few weeks unfold here.
But are you doing all right, Will?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm just thinking through it, thinking my way through it.
I know this is your process. Sure, I understand it.
I'm
just checking in on you, man. Because I saw you and Matt when I walked in here. It was like y'all in a rager the night before, dog. So I'm just checking y'all out, making sure y'all okay. I see Matt talking about making a double already. Just want y'all to know the sun is out, the weekend is coming, everything's cool and all right. I'm doing great. I'm much better than I was yesterday because I went to sleep on it and laughed with some family and friends yesterday. So I'm completely fine with it. But I'll get into the details of all this on the show for sure.
I saw Jamie in the comments saying, I saw a lot of C-, D, and F trade grades for the Bulls, A+ for OKC. We'll get to our grades in a little bit, but I am curious the fact that it seemed most everybody who was talking yesterday, NBA media from all over, had similar opinions on wow, did Sam Presti really just get Alex Caruso for Josh Giddey and no picks? How is that possible? And there's been some discourse yesterday and into today, some of which I've been engaging with my fellow Bulls fans on Twitter about, which is who had the leverage or who had more leverage when these two teams and these two executives came to the negotiating table? Because from my vantage point, I can see some leverage from the Thunder, which is, hey, we know that the Bulls need to get something for Alex Caruso before they lose him for nothing. And we probably have leverage in that I am more confident in my negotiating skills than the man sitting across the table from me. I thought that the Bulls had more leverage in this situation. The Thunder don't need Josh Giddey. They don't want Josh Giddey. And according to Sam Presti's comments in his press release, Josh Giddey essentially requested a trade. So how is it then that the Bulls have the player that Sam Presti has been pining after for years, and you still come out draw at best, when it seemed to me like the Bulls had more leverage than the Thunder did in this situation?
I mean, I think it's because the Bulls really coveted Josh Giddey. I mean, when you read Jake Fisher's report this morning, there were kind of rumblings around the league that the Bulls were focused on Giddey. That, rival executives thought that there might be a sign and trade for Patrick Williams in the works and not, an Alex Caruso deal. But I think when the Bulls kind of locked in on Giddey, it took away a lot of the leverage that they had to get as much value as they could for Caruso. And I think that is a problem with the way that Karnisovas has operated so far. It seems that he is hyper-focused on replicating this style of basketball, this blueprint that he put together that worked for the first 60 games of the 2021 season. And he's trying to figure out a way to replicate that in lieu of actually maximizing his value for his assets. And so when you say, this is the guy I want, not let's take the best offer I can get, the price goes down a little bit. And I think that's kind of what happened there. So I think, again, you can talk about the way that the approach, the way that Karnisovas approached it. You can talk about how good Giddey is as a player. You can talk about the cap flexibility and, basically running out the clock on a rookie scale contract and having to pay Giddey next year. There's so many layers to this, but I think at the end of the day, the reason why this deal happened is because AK wanted Giddey. And if he was just in the market for as many assets as possible, I don't think this is the deal that they would have taken. I think he really valued Giddey above some first round picks this year, above, some lottery, mid to late lottery, multiple first round picks, down the road that were protected, kind of stuff that he was able to get before. He preferred to get the talent, the specific talent that he wanted. And again, we can disagree with how good we think Giddey is, or how much potential he has to get better. But at the end of the day, that's the reason I think why this trade happened. And it's why the Bulls couldn't get more, because as soon as you say, this is the guy I want, and I'm not budging off that, now your ability to ask for more is gone, because, as much as I'm sure OKC wanted Caruso and coveted him, if AK is locked in on Giddey and that's the prize for him, then of course you don't have to add more picks to get a deal done, because he's already getting what he wants.
Yeah, well, that's the part. And those are the arguments, and I shouldn't say arguments, but the debates and disagreements I was on with everybody who was on social media with Twitter. Shout out to y'all. They kept coming to me saying, but Giddey is a good player, but I like Giddey, but I like his upside, I like his youth. And I continue to say, listen, it has nothing to do with Giddey for me. There's nothing to do with him. I want Giddey to be a good player. They went and got somebody that they wanted. They saw him. They coveted him. They okay, we think he can help our team. Fine. I have no problem with that. You got the player that you wanted. I'm talking about selling high on somebody that was, selling low, buying high on somebody that was selling low, pretty much. So Giddey, like you just mentioned, was already out of there. They know they didn't want Giddey. They showed you they didn't want Giddey. He went to them. They were looking for trades to get rid of him. We all understood that. So when you come to the Bulls and and I don't know how they didn't know this, but if you know that they are trying to get rid of an asset, well, you want to maximize. That's exactly what you do. You say, okay, fine, give me this, and then give me this with it. That's how it's supposed to work. A player for player swap is the only issue I had. If you're going to give me a pick with this, yes, okay, fine. Now I'm we can move forward. Bet I got some assets. If you want to give me cash with that, fine, great. I can move forward. I got something extra. This is not something I would do player for player, because the highest value person was on my team. That's who you guys wanted. So if that's what you want, then you're going to have to give me a little bit extra on that. You didn't have an asset that was more valuable on the Bulls than Alex Caruso. So if that's the case, you want to maximize and capitalize on what you can get for your highest value player. And how the pick wasn't attached with that from a team that is drowning in picks. It was I just can't wrap my head around. I still haven't been able to, even after I sat and thought about it and took my time with it, all that. That's my only main issue with that. It's not so much Josh Giddey, because of course he's on my team now. I want him to be better. I want him to be good. And whoever they traded for Caruso, I don't know what kind of player they were going to get. So you might as well get the one that you really want. Fine. But the fact that was it and you attach nothing else to that, that's what I can't get with. And that's where I was like, what the hell are y'all doing?
So a couple more things on that, because I think you brought up some really good points, Dave. Number one is again, Caruso's value was not as high as it was at the trade deadline. I think they could have gotten more for him then. Correct. So, like I said, one playoff run on his contract before you have to extend him, one more year, he's 1 year older. Like those things go against you when you're talking about how valuable is Caruso. So I think based on my understanding and knowledge of what the pre-deadline trade offers were, is this a little bit less than I think that the Bulls would have gotten? Yes. But I don't think it's that far off from the value that they were looking at when you factor that into consideration. I think you bring up a really good point, Dave, that they were trying to get rid of Giddey too. He was a liability to them. They knew they had to move him. They didn't want to be the team that extended him. So I still think there's leverage to be had there when you're making those negotiations. Yeah, I value this guy, but you don't, and you're trying to get off of him. I need to capitalize on Caruso. As much as I like Giddey, I'm going to go elsewhere because a pick is valuable to me here too. The problem is the pick wasn't valuable to Arturas, at least in this draft. Mm-hmm. And so
exactly.
But I think that's a problem. And then, the other thing is, the other thing is with Giddey, again, I think the real reason that this is a challenging situation now is because you are now on the clock where you have to extend him now before, while his value is still down, to try to get a good deal on him and then hope that he exceeds that value as he becomes a Bull and starts play. Or you let this season run out, you let him put up a lot of big numbers and big box score stats on a team that I think is going to struggle a lot more than they did last year. It's going to make him look good because he's putting up big numbers, and then you're going to have to overpay for a guy that's kind of putting up inflated stats. And so I do think that him getting a deal done on him now is really important. Obviously, some other dominoes need to fall in order to clear space to do that. But then the last thing is, look, if this does make you worse, and maybe that affects DeRozan's decision, maybe he wants to leave, or maybe not. But at the end of the day, you are trading in your most valuable defensive player. You are trading in a guy who stretches the floor, shoots 40% on almost 5 threes a game, who was your best plus minus guy for the last 3 years, for a guy that's been a negative plus minus guy who has been a shooting liability, who doesn't shoot it, and who, just has a lot of flaws as a player. You are going to be a worse team. And so does that, is the fact that you have this outgoing top 10 protected pick to the Spurs a part of that? I think if the Bulls are able to keep their pick next year going to the Spurs as a result of this trade, I think that's a really good thing. But at the same time, if you know that you are going to be worse, if you know you're going to be going towards the bottom to try to protect yourself against losing that pick, that even more reason to get future draft capital, because you know they're going to need that when you enter a rebuild. You cannot go into a rebuild without any future picks. That is the problem with how the last rebuild worked out. Caruso was your one chance to get future picks, and you prioritized a player that you're going to have to pay instead. So from the business perspective, from the value perspective, I don't think this was a good deal. But at the same time, you do have a younger player with upside. I understand why they wanted to go this direction as opposed to just getting pure draft capital or protected draft capital. But I think they left a lot on the table. And I think that's a real problem now, because you're looking at a team that has basically no avenues to get future picks now.
We got to take our first break. But I do want to kind of continue that point you were making, Will, about if this signifies the Bulls are actually kind of secretly planning on being a worse team because of the net contributions you've gotten from Caruso versus what you might expect to get from Giddey. But before we break, Daniel MDK in the comments saying draft picks are overrated. I saw plenty of Bulls fans trying to spin this, or maybe not necessarily even trying to spin it, but just putting, looking at the positive side of things, say, hey, well, what would you rather have, an unknown from this draft class, a pick in the teens and the 20s, or maybe even you get 2 picks in the 20s compared to the player that we know who Josh Giddey is right now, who is, by the way, still just a 21-year-old NBA player who has a few years of NBA experience under his belt already. And I understand the logic of that point, but 2 things, what you mentioned, Will, you got to pay Giddey, before next season, and you're paying him more than you would pay a rookie scale contract if you were getting picks instead of that young player. And it's like, it's not just about, well, this is a weak draft class, so I would rather have Josh Giddey than some pick in this year's draft class. No, it's, I think you mentioned, Dave, the volume of picks that OKC has, they can't use them all. They have 27 picks over the next 7 years coming their way, either their own or picks owed to them from other teams, from other trades.
Right.
Like, if you are, in fact, starting this rebuild, you need picks to do that. Not just one player who needs a change of scenery. You need picks to do that. So maybe draft picks are overrated in certain ways. But when you're talking about the specifics of this trade and what the Bulls got and the road that they are staring down, man, it is crazy and I think bad that they got no draft capital out of this trade. Okay, we have to take our first break there. We will come back, continue this conversation on the other side. While we are doing that, hit that thumbs up button if you're hanging out with us on YouTube. We appreciate you spending your Friday afternoon with us. Make sure you also subscribe to that CHGO Sports YouTube channel. Big Dave, who's first?
Oh, I'm going to tell you what is very exciting, and I know why Will is here, because he's very excited to talk about this. Because, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to announce it's that Triple S season. That smooth sack summer is in full effect, ladies and gents. And that's, of course, that's our people at Manscaped. Because when you're playing in the summer sun, make sure you are groomed from the pubes to the bun. Hope you know that rhymed right there. Thanks to our friends at Manscaped, you can make the season your smoothest yet. The Performance Package 5.0 Ultra is the ultimate bundle to keep your boys downstairs cool while looking extra hot. That's Matt Peck in a tank top on the roof in the summer. That's how I go. 10 million worldwide who trust Manscaped with our exclusive offer. Get 20% and free shipping when you use that code BULLS, BULLS. Summertime, and the trimming is easy. You see what they did right there? That was pretty smooth. I like that. Every man knows how scary it is, y'all. When you're going in for that close shave below the belt, you don't like things around there. You get a little, but that's why we trust Manscaped for all them sensitive areas, man. They look out for you. That Lawnmower 5.0 is amazing. It's their 5th generation trimmer, features 2 interchangeable next-gen skin-safe blade heads, a standard one for taking a little off the top, and a new foil blade to go smooth wherever your heart desires. Now that you've got, your thing together, you go to the barbershop, that perfect haircut and everything. Also, Manscaped's liquid formulations to keep freshness even at the summer's hottest barbecues. You get that crop soother, that aftershave lotion on you, and that crop preserver, the anti-chafe deodorant for below the belt. Manscaped got you covered all kinds of ways, y'all. So why don't you get on down, join the 10 million men, and get 20% off and free shipping with using that code BULLS, BULLS at Manscaped. That's 20% off and free shipping with the code BULLS at manscaped.com. It's smooth sack summer, y'all. Get on board or get left behind.
Today's show also brought to you by our friends at Lucy Nicotine. I'm not going to lie to y'all. When I was heading home from the office yesterday, trying to process and wrap my head around this Alex Caruso trade, I had a brief moment where I craved a cigarette. And I haven't craved a cigarette in a long time. I haven't smoked a cigarette in years.
Congratulations.
That trade made me want a cigarette for a brief moment in time. But I have grown, I have matured, and I have upped my nicotine routine over the past few years. And Lucy has helped me do that. It is a 100% pure nicotine product that is always tobacco-free. Available in pouches, the good old classic nicotine gum, and their favorite, my favorite, what they call their breakers, which are pouches that have a little extra burst ball in them that release extra flavor when you bite down on them. They are available in 4 milligram or 8 milligram doses, depending on your nicotine routine. Try all of their flavors, some of which include mint, berry citrus. I love the berry citrus. Apple ice is another one of my favorites. They also have them in espresso. Nice. You can also get the gum in anywhere from 2, 4, or 6 milligram doses. If you want to level up your nicotine routine with Lucy, go to lucy.co/CHGO CHGO Bulls. That's Lucy.co/CHGO Bulls. Use promo code CHGO Bulls to get 20% off your first order. Lucy offers free shipping and has a 30-day refund policy if you change your mind. That's Lucy.co and use promo code CHGO Bulls to get 20% off and always free shipping. And here comes the fine print. Ladies and gentlemen, Lucy products are only for adults of legal age. Every order is age verified. Warning, this product contains nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical. Lucy Nicotine. Check them out. All right. So continuing that conversation. So to your point, Will, about this move, player for player, and like what you're getting on the court, it certainly seems like this trade will make the Bulls worse. If you change no other pieces around taking out Caruso and putting in Josh Giddey, the Bulls will be a worse team next season. I agree with that. It kind of makes you wonder if this is in fact the first of several moves that AK has up his sleeve, because they are in a way gearing towards something different. Maybe he doesn't feel like calling it a rebuild because that's like a no-no word. That's like taboo for AK. I'm sure it's probably also taboo for Bulls ownership, who wants to keep their stadium full next season. But to me, that's the only way this makes sense. Can you see Josh Giddey, DeMar DeRozan, and Nikola Vucevic sharing the floor together for large stretches of games next season? Because that to me makes no freaking sense.
Yeah. And look, I mean, it doesn't help either that they didn't get off of any money in this trade. So, even just in order to continue to make these moves, like the Zach situation still remains. They have to get off of Zach in order to bring back DeMar. Do they even want to bring back DeMar anymore? We've heard a couple of teams now having interest in Patrick Williams. So to me, like, if you weren't going to get any picks, and I think you should have been, if you weren't going to get multiple young players, and I think you probably could have, at least then toss them another bad contract, whether it's Vooch or Javon Carter. They probably weren't going to go for Zach LaVine, but like, you have such a bad financial cap crunch right now that you need to sort out, and you didn't help yourself at all with your best asset. So I'm not saying the Bulls had to use Caruso in order to clear up some space for them to be able to do other things, but that was one way to clear up some space to be able to do other things. Now they don't have that. So does that mean you're going to have to attach Io or a pick in order to move off of Zach LaVine in order to bring DeMar back? Like, and what does that say about the direction you're going? I mean, even if you bring back DeMar at this point, if you remove Io and Zach from the rotation, well, you're still going to be a much worse team because you're losing now two of your best defensive players in Io and Caruso. So I think this was a opportunity to do a couple of different things, to clear out cap space, to make your cap future a little bit more clean and easy. It was an opportunity to get multiple first-round picks or a young player and a first-round pick in order to help kickstart your rebuild. But the fact that like DeRozan could still be back in the fold, the fact that they weren't able to offload any other money, the fact that they weren't able to get any other picks, like I said, maybe Giddey ends up being a great player. Maybe he ends up being a better player in the next 4 years than Caruso. I'm not like removing that from the list of possible outcomes. I don't think it's likely, but let's say that is the case. Well, you still lost the deal because you had an opportunity to get more or to offload more money. And I think that's like AK, the only deal you could like really point to and say AK won this deal was Caruso on the mid-level exception 3 years ago. And now he's turned that into a lost deal. So if you are losing every deal by 15, 20%, like it's not the end of the world because maybe Giddey outplays it and he ends up looking really good and you get him on a manageable extension and it looks great. But at the end of the day, you still lost that trade by 20% because you weren't able to offload a bad contract or you weren't able to acquire an additional pick or both. And I think if they weren't so fixated on Giddey, that may have been an option. I'm not saying I know all the potential trade out there. I did clarify this morning on Twitter that like the trades that I had reported about, those were trades that happened before the trade deadline. It's very unlikely to me that Caruso would have had the same value today as he had pre-trade deadline, just because of the fact that he's older and has one less year on his contract. But again, that just goes to show you that you have to maximize your potential to capitalize on guys when you have the chance. You can't wait until they're at the nadir of their value or they've lost 50% of their value, because now when you try to reset things, well, you can't get as much back, and that hurts you going down the road. So when we talk about like rebuilding or, the team kicking the can down the road and trying to kind of retool on the fly, like all that stuff is a good idea in theory if you're able to help yourself by getting more picks. And the fact that they weren't able to do that, I think it makes this next rebuild, this next retool, whatever you want to call it, that much harder, because now they're doing it with only their own picks. And by the way, they may not even have their own pick next year. And so this just, I think retaining that Spurs pick also becomes a huge part of this deal if they're able to do that.
You good, Matt?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to like make that quick clarification of like, that's why I think there was so much outrage from fans yesterday, is because, most recently your reporting reminding Bulls fans of what some of those offers for Caruso in the recent past were, meaning multiple picks, and some of them even multiple first-round picks and a young player attached to those picks. That is why we were all sitting around like Mr. Bean in that GIF in a deserted, tall grass field, looking around like, where are the picks? Where's the follow-up tweet telling us about the picks? And that's why we were all so mad, because we could have had so much more if you traded this guy when you should have.
Yeah, I mean, exactly right. And that's exactly why, a year I've been, this, talking about trading Caruso. But yeah, I think reading those things, especially that Will wrote, so that stays on your brain. So you're like, okay, well, if you're giving that up, then obviously, you're going to get something attached to this and not just take a player. No, you're not. That's crazy. Even I'm reading, and I was just reading something from Jake Fisher, take it how you want it. But I was just reading something from Jake Fisher where he was saying the Bulls were, during these processes, the Bulls were seeking 4 unprotected first-round picks, which is an unserious thing. That is completely unserious, because we were like 2. I don't think any of us, when we were talking about even mocks, were like, okay, 2 of them would happen. You know what I mean? Like that. But understood, but 4 unprotected, that is just not something I saw as feasible or making any sense. I would have been happy with a second rounder in 2026 or 2027, whatever. I would have been fine with that. But thinking they're going into this deal like, oh, you want us? Well, then guess what? 4 of them things. That's what you're going to have to give us for Alex Caruso. No team's doing that. That's an unserious thing to come into the negotiations with. And so when you're asking for Giddey, and again, I'll get into Giddey and how I feel about Josh Giddey a little later. But when you go into that situation, knowing, and Matt, thank you for putting up what you put up on Twitter, the differences between the press release from OKC and the ones from the Bulls, because the OKC press release detailed with actual affection and love for that player that was there and told you everything step by step in the process that happened to lead to this. And with Caruso, it was just a blurb at the bottom of the thing. Like, yeah, he played here. It was like, yo, what was that? No, man, like it could have been worded and done so much better. But that's the only thing that continues to upset us and to get us mad. I don't want to speak for everybody, but that's the thing that it is. It's walking away with just simply one player when you had the cards. You know what I mean? It's like folding with a full house. And you know what I mean? And they got like a pair. That's it. And it's like, dude, no, man. Like, you had the full house in your hand. You walk away with something extra on that. And it's just a bad negotiation to go about something. You don't have to value the picks. You know what I mean? But that's why I have other people in my staff and office who might see some more value in having a pick or doing something like that. But you can't just walk away with nothing. Somebody was arguing with me on there about, man, trading, even when the Lakers traded Shaq, you know what I mean? Look at the guys they got back. I'm like, yeah, but even when they did that, they got a pick. Like, you walk away with a pick still, bro. That is how it's supposed to go in these situations when you have the upper hand, when you have the player that has the higher value at that time. Not to say, like you said, Will, not to say Josh Giddey can't reach that level of Alex Caruso. We don't know yet. But at this point in time now, we know who the higher value player was. So if you're the higher value player, guess what? You're going to have to give up something. AK knows this from the Nikola Vucevic trade. There was the higher value player to him. He was like, oh my God, that's the one I want. Well, guess what? And what did OKC, what did Orlando do? Well, guess what? You're going to have to attach a couple things to that to get him, man, because they understood the value of what he wanted. You know what I mean? Like, and so you have to go in with that kind of mindset and that kind of thing. And they did not go in there with that. It was overdone saying 4 unprotected picks. And then there was no, nothing to land on, nothing soft to kind of land on. It was completely, I'll stay. And that was crazy.
Here's some optimism from one of our fellow Bulls fans, Antoine, in the comments, saying hopefully Josh Giddey can become a good player. We all at some point doubted Kobe White, and look at him now. Even though he should have gotten some draft picks, I believe AK is trying to learn from his mistakes. There's some rose-colored glasses. And then the immediate next comment from Chocolate Salty Bulls is, I wouldn't trust AK with my dog and a jar of peanut butter. So, there's the spectrum of Bulls fans for you.
Yo.
Lovely. I don't know what you're trying to say there, Salty Bulls. I mean, I think I might know what you're trying to say, but I don't care for it.
Oh man, that's hilarious. All right.
Also, did you guys Sports Chicago style in the comments just put up Evan Sidery tweet? This fairly new, I think, on the ZNBA reporter who's starting to make some. He's the one who's been tweeting about Bulls Jazz a lot. Apparently, he just had a tweet saying Torrey Craig is going to decline his player option with the Bulls for $2.8 million and hit free agency. Torrey Craig will garner a lot of interest from contending teams. In need of a Torrey Craig. Well, there's another interesting wrinkle. Do we have any people in the front court left other than the Vooch?
Go ahead, Will.
Adamas no-go. Yeah, and I think Casey Johnson alluded to this. I don't think it was like a hard report, but I think he kind of assumed that Torrey was going to decline the player option and test free agency. But again, like you're kind of, and I think like bringing in Giddey now moves Kobe into a different role. You remove Caruso from the mix, who was obviously a huge piece of what the Bulls did last year, and a guy that DeRozan really appreciated and valued having in the locker room and on the court with him. He's now gone. Does that affect DeRozan's free agency? When you're in this kind of situation, I do think that more moves are coming. Just one, because they have to, but two, because I just think the dynamics of the team have now changed in a really big way. And so it would not surprise me if, this kind of informed some of the rest of the free agent moves now, right? Like, okay, you've got some younger guys in the mix. Like, does that mean you want to place more of a priority on keeping Patrick? Does that mean that some of the older guys are going to potentially want to walk away or move to other teams in free agency?
Let's knock out our second ad break right there. We'll come back and continue this conversation. We will give our official grades for this Caruso-Giddey trade. Take a look at some grades from some other NBA people, and then talk about if this was the first domino, which ones could be the next to fall and what those might look like. That's all still ahead on CHGO Bulls on this Friday afternoon. If you didn't do it the first time around, hit that like button now. Do it for our guys, Joey and Steven, working behind the controls. Yes. Do it for Alex Caruso as a thank you on his way out of town. We will tell him that you gave us the like that's really for him. Big Dave, who's next?
Do it for our guy, Ray, at Ray CDJR. Because when it comes to finding your next vehicle, make Ray CDJR your number one draft pick. Because this June, shop Chryslers, Dodges, Jeeps, and of course Rams at Ray CDJR in Fox Lake. And during the Make This the Summer event, find the perfect vehicle and score some huge savings as well. For a limited time, lease the new 2024 Jeep Wrangler Willys 4xe. I like Willys in there, Will. You, sir. Getting cars named after you now. For only $419 per month, or shop over 125 vehicles priced under $20,000. You heard me. Let the amazing team at Ray CDJR help land the perfect vehicle at the perfect price. Because with Ray's price promise, the numbers you're hearing now are the same prices you can expect to shop with in-store and online. That's because Ray's price promise means no price changing, no add-ons, and never, ever, ever any hidden fees. It's not how they roll. Since they prioritize affordability for their customers, hurry into Ray CDJR today and shop with Chicago's largest inventories. Then drive home with more money in your hip pocket than you would expect. Ooh, that rhyme. I'm so cool. So if you're in the market for a new vehicle, then you have to check out the team at Ray CDJR. That's Ray, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram, because they are the only team that we recommend. Visit them today on Route 12 in Fox Lake. For more information, visit Ray CDJR in Fox Lake or raycdjr.com because they're serving the community since 1963.
Today's CHGO Bulls also brought to you by Circa Sportsbook, offering those tight money line splits and their low hold model. Always striving to have starting odds of -110 on game spreads for point total over unders, favorites, underdogs, money lines, and all that jazz. Unlike a lot of other sports books these days who push those starting odds to -115 or -20 for no good reason at all. Circa also keeps as little money as possible on futures bets like golf tournaments and who's winning it all. If you got an inkling for who's hoisting the WNBA championship trophy this season, or who's going to be MLB champs, it's probably not the Cubs or the White Sox. Hey, if you want to make some easy money, just bet on the Cubs and or White Sox to lose all the time until the end of time. Because, man, things are dark. I thought maybe for a second the Cubs were going to turn it around. They finally managed to win a series, but nope. Man, they looked ugly today. But it's okay, because even if your teams are looking ugly, you can make money off of them looking ugly. I do it all the time. It's real easy. Plus, of course, Circa has that wonderful, unbeatable, unmatchable customer service. Real people behind that Circa Sports brand who resolve any issues you might have in a timely fashion, unlike those other sports books, almost all of whom use those dreaded good-for-nothing chatbots. Kill the machines. All aspects of that Circa Sportsbook app are being run by the same team of people, human beings, that run their main Circa Sportsbook at Circa Resort and Casino in Las Vegas. Download the Circa Sports Illinois app at circasports.com/Illinois-app to sign up today. Be on the lookout also for Circa's various events, watch parties, and tailgates around the Chicagoland area. Shout out to them. Today, as always, on every Wrigley 120 Friday, they were hanging out at Murphy's with our CHGO Cubs crew and their fellow Cubs brethren at Murphy's before the game, in the bleachers during the game, at Almost Home in Wrigleyville after the game. Great times there, part of which is brought to you by our friends at Circa. If you or someone you know may have a gambling problem, just call 1-800-GAMBLER. That's 1-800-426-2537. Text GAMB to 833-234 or visit areyourreallywinning.com. All right. So, guys, let's talk grades. Our guy Fish said, I give this trade a G-. Wow, that's not even in the normal number or sequence of letters that people can get grades of.
Can we actually, before we do grades, answer this one question from G?
Sure.
Because he wants to ask like what we think of Giddey. Basically, he says, where do we think Josh Giddey would go in this draft? Higher than pick 6, which he was drafted in 2021. I think we haven't like really necessarily talked about Giddey as a player and what they're getting and why the Bulls want to take a bet on that. I will say before we get into him specifically that like, regardless of where he would go in this draft, number one, you already have 3 seasons of information about him, what his strengths are, what his flaws are, how far you can kind of play with him being, a significant part of a rotation. As we saw in this most recent playoff run for them, where he was kind of played off the court against the Mavericks in the second round of the playoffs. So I don't think it's a 1-for-1, but I think the real reason why you can't do that is because of the contract situation. Getting in a guy who's even on like the number 1 pick in this draft, who's going to make more money next year than Giddey will, to have that guy on like 10 to 12, $13 million for the next 4 years is much more valuable than having Giddey for $8.5 million this year and then having to pay him 18, 20, 22 plus million for each of the next 4 years to keep him. And so part of the leverage that the Bulls lost in this deal was the ability to get a player on a really cost-controlled contract. And I think that that's just a big piece of it when you factor in not only getting financial flexibility for them to make moves this year, but also how he may kind of be a fixture in the Bulls cap sheet for years to come now. But let's talk about Giddey himself as a player. I think, people are really kind of trashing him because of the way that his season ended. I think he's a little bit better than that. 6'8" guard who is a really brilliant and gifted passer, very good vision, very creative. He's a fun player to watch. He gets out in transition, really good rebounder, grab and go guy, can get up the floor and just get his team into easy offense. Improved as a shooter. And I know people are going to say like, the Bulls have Peter Patton. Maybe they can make him, a 3-point sniper. Well, the Thunder have Chip England, who's like one of the top 5 most notable shooting coaches of all time. And Giddey has made strides, but it's not like he's really become, a high volume shooter. I think like I was listening to some other podcast or saw somebody else talking about it, like 80% of his threes were completely unguarded. So
yeah, 6 feet or more away was the nearest defender on those ones that he was knocking down. And the ones where he had a defender within 6 feet of him, he shot like 19% on those 3-point attempts.
Yeah, so that I think that's a big weakness. Like, and it seems based on Woj's tweets that like the Bulls want to put the ball in his hands to allow him to do some of the stuff that he is really good at, right? He's not a great driver. I think he can get downhill, but it's more just like straight line drive stuff. He's not like really breaking guys down off the dribble. He doesn't have like a ton of wiggle or shake in his game where he can like break guys down. I don't think he necessarily is a very physical driver either. He's got a pretty low free throw attempt rate. So like I've heard people compare the Ben Simmons thing a lot because he's like a big guard who can't shoot. Like prime Ben Simmons could just like put you in the goal, and Giddey's not really going to do that. So I do think Giddey is a really creative offensive player. And I think with the ball in his hands a little bit more, he can be successful. And I do want to be excited about the upside there. Again, going from a 30-year-old who playing his absolute best basketball of his life as like, a defensive anchor and offensive role player to a 21-year-old who was a former top 6 pick who has, I think, some really gifted parts of his offensive game, and just to try to develop that. Like, I do think that's the kind of move the Bulls should be making with this deal. Obviously we've talked about like, it would have been great to get a pick, would have been great to get off some money, but I like the fact that they're going younger here and hopefully what that kind of indicates. So, defensively, he's not great. I think he's just not like really athletic. So he's not, and I think it works on both sides, right? Like he's not really shifty. He's not sliding his feet. He's not necessarily like getting over screens or protecting the rim. So he's a very limited player. But I think if you do put the ball in his hands and you do let him create and do the things that he's good at, I am curious at least about the upside there. So we'll just kind of have to see how that evolves. But again, so much of that depends on, well, is DeMar still going to be here? And because he's got the ball in his hands a lot, you just made Kobe your starting point guard. Are you now taking the ball out of his hands? And was that due to his like confidence or trust in the front office and coaching staff? He's coming up for a contract in 2 years now. So I think it just leads to a lot of questions, but I know for a fact that like there are going to have to be more moves. So it's hard to kind of like think about Giddey in the context of the current team, but I do think that he does a lot of stuff well. There's some interesting parts of his game, and I'm very curious and hopeful to see whether he can improve.
Real quick, Dave, before you give us your thoughts on how Giddey might fit with the Bulls. Shout out to Matt Nuku with a super chat who said, "Happy Friday, guys. I like Giddey as a player, not a fan of getting 0 picks, though." Yeah, who is? I'll like this trade more if there are more moves to be made. Ditto. Yeah, appreciate the super chat. I feel like that's a like very down the middle, but maybe with just a tinge of positivity take from Matt with the super chat. I appreciate it. All right, Dave, what are you thinking? You see Giddey's fit?
Yeah, let me throw my tinge of my positivity in here, because this is actually when I can actually be proud. Because one, as Will has said and continues to say the show, I feel like this signals that change is coming. Like, there's no way you putting those guys together on the floor. It's not happening at all. That change is coming. This dude is 21 as well. They just signed him for 1 year. They're going to sign him. They're going to pay this dude. He's going to be here. And however your point guard has it will be what the rest of your team is. You know what I mean? And we know who he can't play with. We can see already who it's not going to work with on this team. So I think those moves are coming, honestly. I think this signals change for the Chicago Bulls that they actually talked about. We'll see if they follow through on it. But for me, that's where I get some kind of happiness about it. Like, okay, this is a real signal for me. Like, we're actually going to do something more so than anything I've seen them do, more so than like changing coaches and stuff like that. Actually changing the product on the floor means something. But as far as Josh Giddey, I mean, I don't hate Josh Giddey. Like, I don't really, he doesn't bother me. I know I agree with everything Will was saying. I mean, you got a guy who can't score. I like guys who can't score, and everyone tells me he can't score, and then I look in the box score and they'll have 16 points. And I'm like, well, how can you do that? You can't shoot. Like, you're not strong enough to get in the drive. That says something about your IQ, and it says something about your craftiness. Because he's not getting to the free throw line either. Like, he's not doing it that way either. So he's scoring some kind of way. The ball is going into the bucket. So I got to give him respect for that. That just shows me his craftiness and shows me he has some IQ. We talk about to see what he had in his best season. Was it like 16, 7, and 8 or something like that in one of his best seasons? There's been improvement, and you're right, he is not a high volume 3-point shooter, but his 3-point percentage has gone up every single year. His efficient field goal percentage went up, and his turnovers went down as well. So I like Josh Giddey. The flaws are, we all know the flaws, and that's why I don't, when people are trying to throw the Lonzo, Rondo, or Ben Simmons comparisons. Okay, you mentioned the three dudes who can actually control both sides of the floor. You know what I mean? Control it on defense as well. Like, that is the big part of this, and that is a flaw for young Mr. Giddey right here. We'll see if it can improve, but maybe he does need a change of scenery. Maybe, he just needs to hear a different voice. We've seen that happen a million times for different players. Hell, we saw it happen with Lowry. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Just getting a different voice and a whole different thing can bring out a different kind of side of you. And the fact that he will pretty much have a green light here in Chicago, because like I said, I feel like this will be something that is torn down and changed. And I feel like they're going young for sure on this squad. So as a player, I like him. Like Will said, he's a great passer. If you want to go watch those highlights, please. Like, he is a really great passer. So if we got somebody on the team who wants to cut, like, he will find you. Like, he's really good at that. He's really good at, as Will said, getting the ball and getting up the floor and starting the transition. But I like him in the half court. I like his passing in the half court as well. He'll give you some ooh-ah moments for sure when it comes to his passing. So, yeah, like, I don't mind him. And he's 21 years old. Like, he'll have more time to grow a little bit and, see what's out there for him. So, no, I don't dislike Josh Giddey at all.
I don't like this. Well, no, that's just because of what I've been reading in the chat while you were finishing that thought. Rob said the Aussies buying Giddey jerseys is going to help the Reinsdorf's pockets. Hate that. Samuel asking Rob, did Mark K order his Giddey jersey yet? Rob saying
Mark is not a fan of this trade.
He's not, yeah, from what I remember,
buying into the new Bulls channel. Yeah, no, I've seen some Mark K tweets over the last 24 hours. He is not a big fan of this.
He's not pleased. Okay, all right.
But look, the first thing he DM'd me was, "Do you hate this as much as I do?" So that tells you what you need to know.
You should have said you got to be specific.
Just like real quick, as far as the fit, you're thinking about the Simmons comp. Will, I was also listening to Zach Lowe and Bobby Marks talk about this on today's Low Post that dropped, and like Zach Lowe put it in a way that I thought was about as perfect as you could put it when you're evaluating who Josh Giddey is as a player and what he can provide the Bulls and what he can't. Because of the whole Woj tweet about like, hey, this is a potential future all-star the Bulls just got here. And everybody went, really? If you are a guy who is going to be the engine for an NBA offense, as that Woj tweet made it seem like that's what AK wants with Josh Giddey, and you can't shoot, spacing the floor shoot, you have to be either really good or ideally great at every other facet of your game. Facts. If you are going to have the ball in your hands that much and you can't shoot, you have to be, like you were saying, Will, you got to be a strong finisher at the rim. You need a strong mid-range game. You need to be able to get to the free throw line. And ideally, on top of that, hold your own and maybe even be above average on the defensive end of the ball. If you're a primary ball handler, offensive creator, and initiator who can't shoot. And Giddey seems to be a guy who wants to have that role of someone who can be a lead initiator, lead creator on offense, who hasn't found his floor spacing, shooting touch yet at the NBA level, and is not good to great in all of those other categories, and far from it. And that's what leaves me a little underwhelmed and worried right now. I'm not saying that Josh Giddey at 21 years of age can't improve those other elements of his game that are a little bit weaker in the same ways that Ben Simmons is an incomplete player. I'm just saying, there's one really strongly checked box on what Giddey can bring you, and all of the other boxes are empty right now. And Bulls fans have to hope that this change of scenery is what he needs to maybe grow his game in some of those other areas. And I did shout out to our buddy Eli Schuster of Bleacher Nation Bulls. I saw a tweet of his either last night or this morning that was a thought that hadn't yet occurred to me, which was Bulls fans always complain about losing those young players who we draft and fail to develop, and then they need a change of scenery, and then they go and flourish and blossom somewhere else. Giddey could be an opportunity for the Bulls to, as Eli said it in his tweet, flip that script and be the beneficiaries, the benefactors of, like, hey, Giddey needed a change of scenery. He was lost in OKC with all those other pieces, maybe there's an untapped version of Josh Giddey that we're going to see now in a Bulls jersey instead of a Thunder jersey. I'm not saying I think that that's the most likely thing to happen. I'm saying that's a thought that hadn't yet occurred to me, and it did make me feel a little bit better for about 12 minutes.
Well, I think the other thing is, like, we're talking about Giddey's flaws at the highest level of the NBA game, right? We're talking about, is he going to get played off the court in the fourth quarter and clutch minutes of the second round of the playoffs? Like, the Bulls are nowhere close to playing at that level. And I do think when you reduce the standards a little bit and you just kind of let him run free, especially if DeMar moves on, he's going to have the ball in his hands a lot. I think he's going to be able to do some creative stuff, and I think he's going to be able to put up some big numbers the way that he did in OKC his first 2 seasons. And look, when you make a trade for your best asset, you want to be able to get a guy who's going to be able to like play at the highest level, right? Like that's kind of the trade-off that you're taking. You're trading win now production for potential to be able to do that. And I think the Bulls are obviously hoping and betting that Giddey can do that. He has not been able to do it so far, but I agree that like that doesn't necessarily mean that he can't continue to improve with the change of scenery. So again, I'm optimistic for Giddey. I don't think he's going to be like the best player on a championship team. I don't necessarily think he's going to be like a multi-time all-star, but I think he's going to put up some big numbers. I think he's going to play a creative brand of basketball. I think he's going to be exciting to watch. It's going to be nice to just have young players that can get better, that aren't like at or past their prime. So I think from that perspective, like, and again, just making a move towards like a long-term thought about where this team can go, I think is really important. And, you know, again, I'm not saying he's going to be a superstar, but I like the direction that they went with this. It would have been great to get more picks. It would have been great to get off more salary. It would have been great to get a guy under team control. There were definitely a lot of flaws in the process here. And the bit from like a business side, I think they lost the deal, but I do appreciate and like the fact that they're getting young guys with upside who are high draft picks as distressed assets. That's how they should be moving forward, especially as a team without additional future picks. Like that's how you have to go about rebuilding and kind of just getting yourselves back on track here with a younger core.
All right. Well, just in case Giddey turns into an all-NBA superstar down the road, let's make sure the receipts are out there so that if we're wrong or partly wrong, people will be able to call us out about it. What are our official grades for this Alex Caruso for Josh Giddey, player for player, straight up swap? Because there are a lot of grades going around. Shout out to our guy Ricky of SB Nation. He gave the Bulls an F and the Thunder an A+. Kevin Pelton did a grade for ESPN Plus that I saw this morning. He gave the Thunder an A and the Bulls a C-, so a little bit kinder than Ricky. I don't know if Joey, you were able to make that graphic or not, but anyway, I obviously also gave the Thunder an A. I gave me an A+. Yeah, no, okay, that checks out. I think like Caruso is the like the perfect piece to add to that team that is contending for a championship right now. And I wasn't quite as harsh as Ricky. I gave AKA the Bulls a D-. The D- is instead of an F because I am hopeful it means that there are more moves following this one and that they are finally actually going to try something else. Hey, congratulations. You made your first trade in 3 years.
Yes.
D-.
As a pet special. But the reasons that you said, Matt, are the reasons why I gave the Bulls a C+. Because I do think it means change. I do think it signals that. I think that it's going to be better. And I don't hate Giddey. Like, I just don't. I don't hate Giddey at all. And the potential, he has the potential to make that C+ actually be actual B+. Like, he has that kind of potential if he comes out and he does his thing like that. But it's the fact that for me, this signals that, okay, we recognize what we did and we are going to be true to our word out here and actually start the hell over and bring something new in here and have some younger guys, as Will said, get in here and run around and, you know, see what we got, because we can't run this same thing back out on the floor. That's what the C+ honestly was for that move right there. And for the fact that I actually a little higher on Giddey than most people are. I guess I should say most people than Matt is. A little higher on him as far as his potential is concerned and what he could be, just because he'll have the basketball and have a chance to show everyone exactly what he can do, because he's not coming off the floor. And and he stays on the floor. And, you know, I believe season 2, he played 76, and last season he played, 80 or something like that. But he's going to play, and he's going to get his opportunity. His minutes are going to be up. So that means his numbers are going to be up too. But, yeah, like that's why I gave it, Matt. That's exactly why I gave him the C+, because you're actually telling me, oh, man, okay, fine, we're actually going to do some shit.
That's worthy of a C+. Reagan in the comments said, man, I wish any of my teachers in school graded like Big Dave does.
Well, what grade did you get? They got a C+. What grade did you get, bro?
They deserve, regardless of what the trade return was for Caruso at this point, they flat out deserve an F for waiting this long to do it. That alone makes them worthy of an F. I gave them a D- out of charity in the hope that this finally means we're going to see some change around here. Will?
That's nice of you, but you gave them some charity, and I did too. Just your charity was that time was this. It's still charity.
I think I gave OKC an A+ and maybe a D for the Bulls. Maybe I want to move it up to a D+. Look, in a vacuum, the Bulls lost this trade in a big way. I think they had opportunities to get a better deal for Caruso and didn't. I think they, as we've kind of talked about ad nauseum here, like I think they lost on negotiations. I think this does not help them from a cap standpoint. I think they missed opportunities to get picks or dump bad salary. They lost out on opportunities to attach Caruso to LaVine in order to move him, which I don't necessarily think is that big of a problem. But now that's off the table. But again, I do think I'm a little bit higher on Giddey than some. I like the fact that they're going younger. They should have gotten picks, but those weren't available in this scenario. And so this is much better than if they were to have gone after like, you know, an older player to continue to try to like win now, or broken this up into multiple older players to try to keep on swinging here. And maybe it's still going to happen that way. Like as Jake Fisher noted, there's like maybe some potential interest in KCP. There's still purported interest in DeMar and bringing him back. So like, I think the outside context of what will come does have an effect on this, but in a vacuum, I think the Bulls lost this trade badly. They have potential to make it better. They have potential to make it worse. But I think the real issue to me here is that like, it's another example of AK losing a deal on the margins and not capitalizing when he had a chance. So for that reason, I think it's like not a passing grade by any means. I think they could have done a lot better. I would have maybe gone a couple of different directions just in general, because again, I think I'm a little bit higher on Giddey, but like doesn't necessarily mean I think he's, you know, a franchise pillar. So that was my grade. You know, I think somebody mentioned Lonzo in the comments and how he factors in here too. I thought that was an interesting kind of wrinkle from what Woj tweeted and what Darnell wrote.
Like, I was going to say, Darnell made a little note in his write-up about all of this. It sounds like Lonzo could be on his way out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, we'll see how much do they extend Giddey for? What other moves do they make? I think that all that stuff matters and does impact the Bulls' score in this regard, but just in a vacuum, don't love the deal.
Colin in the comments saying, I'm not giving AK a passing grade for learning algebra at age 50. Meanwhile, Rockstar 80 saying Giddey will be the superior player over Caruso by next year. Book it. Wow. How about that? Also, it sounds like we got a Thunder fan in the chat, the great Duke brother saying, I was pretty shocked we didn't give you any draft picks along with Josh Giddey. Yeah. So are we. Real quick before we get out of here, we're about out of time. So are the three of us on the same page that if this was the first of many moves that AK plans on making to shake up this roster, like he said, when the Bulls season concluded, are we all in agreement that the next domino is going to be a salary dump trade for Zach LaVine, now that Zach LaVine and Caruso cannot be packaged together? And second part of that question, do we think that Zach LaVine trade happens between now and draft night on Wednesday?
I'll answer first because I'll be quick. Yes, Sacramento. He's going to Sacramento. It's done. He's out. Next. Go ahead, Will.
I love you, Dave. I think a couple of things now, after having after having executed this trade, I think a couple of future things become even more important. Number one, you cannot give up assets to move Zach LaVine. You absolutely cannot do it. If that means you got to keep Zach and let DeMar walk, so be it. But like the fact that you did not get future assets for Caruso means that if you give up picks to move Zach, you're going into a rebuild with negative picks. You absolutely cannot do that. If they had gotten a ton of picks for Caruso and then could attach one of them to move Zach, okay, maybe a little bit more palatable, but like you cannot go into a rebuild with negative picks. That would be a disaster. So I think that's one big key here. I think keeping their pick next year in the draft, top 10 protected to the Spurs in the 2025 draft. It's supposed to be a loaded class. I think even if they're drafting like 5 or 6, that could be better than maybe the number 1 pick in this draft. Absolutely critical to keep your pick. And again, go into next season, Kobe, Io, Patrick, Giddey, Dalen Terry, Julian Phillips, number 11 pick this year, and a number, 5 or 10 pick, a top 10 pick in next year's draft. That's a young core I think fans can be excited about. That's a direction I think fans can be excited about. If those things happen, I think that, again, this trade looks a lot better, even if they may be lost on the margins. As for Zach, again, you just cannot let him go. You cannot attach assets to dump him. I think that would be a disaster. And so we'll see if they do that. But like, to me, I would much rather keep him than force that deal just to create the space that you need to bring back DeMar.
I think somebody in the comments a minute ago was mentioning like another reason that you would have liked to get a pick of some kind in the Caruso deal is that it would sting less if the Bulls do end up having to attach an asset to Zach. And now, if you do, you're giving up something that is yours and not something that you just got in a trade and aren't too attached to yet. Which is unfortunate. All right. Sadly, we are out of time for the day. We are out of time for the week. Thank you for tuning in to today's show. Thanks for tuning in all week. Like I said, we went live right when this news broke yesterday. We had Kendall Gill in studio with us. If you missed that Thursday episode, go give it a watch now or at any point this weekend when you got a free hour and want to torture your Bulls fan brain a little bit more because today wasn't enough. We'll be back next week, starting Monday with a fresh episode and another fun special guest in studio with us on Monday. We're going to have a couple of guests next week leading into the draft on Wednesday night, which, by the way, quick reminder and plug, come hang out with us, PB&J in the West Loop, live CHGO Bulls draft party night, draft party show. We will go live at 7 p.m. Central, right when the NBA draft kicks off. We'll see what the heck the Bulls are going to do with the 11th pick on that Wednesday night. Come hang out with us at PB&J. Free entry. Come hang out. Great deals from our friends at Coors Light, presenting sponsors for all of our draft coverage next week and into other parts of the offseason. In the meantime, this weekend, read all of Goat's stuff over last week, allchgo.com. Follow him, Will_Gottlieb. Big Dave is at BAL, BAWL Sports. What should people go listen to this weekend, Dave?
Why Lord? About No Worries. Go listen to that. That's the album of the year right now. Go listen to it. Shout out Crunk.
Listen to the man.
His album's incredible as well.
Listen to the man who knows all the music. Big Dave, BAL, BAWL Sports. I'm Bulls_Peck. We are CHGO_Bulls. Shout out to our producers, Joey and Steven behind the controls. We will talk to you on Monday next week. Have a wonderful weekend, Chicago. Happy birthday, brother Dave. Shout out, bro. Love you. See you next time, Bulls Nation. See you, Red. Be good.
Get some sleep, Will.